Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our sad last session for the SAI Fellows. Well, second to last, shall we say. Next one will be demo day. Very excited today to welcome Atta and Niba to this panel discussion. It's gonna be super informal, guys, okay? This is gonna be a conversation. Atta will go first, share her story, and then Niba will go second, share her story, and then it's gonna be kind of a free-for-all. I'll have some questions, but I'm hoping that you guys will also jump in and just ask questions away. These are two incredible women that are paving their paths in science communication. Niba was our C3 fellow, and she's actually current resident at SAI and doing wonderful things. Just always humble to see what she's up to and doing all our awesomeness. And also Atta, whom recently I just learned she's defending in December 4th. So it is incredible that she's here with us today. So thank you, Atta, for being here. And I won't steal the thunder. I will let them tell their stories and then we'll get into the Q&A. So Atta and Niba, welcome. Atta, you'll go first. And so the way it will work, they'll tell their story for about, let's say 8 minutes or so-ish. Then and then each of them will go, and then we'll do Q&A, and then we'll have lots of time for that. Okay. So Atta, welcome.
Cool. So hi all. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So I did my bachelor in chemistry over there. The reason I got into science primarily is because one day my grandfather did a bazooka with potatoes using PVC pipes. And I got into chemistry thinking I was gonna blow things up, and that's not how things work in labs. Turns out. So yeah, I finished my bachelor in chemistry at University of Puerto Rico, and then I moved to Michigan to do my PhD in chemical biology. I had no concept of snow. I didn't know snow was a thing. So I came to Michigan and saw snow for the first time in my life, and that was an experience. And yeah, throughout so I would say like on my second year, I got interested of what was science communication, which essentially is something that's like, oh, I did this with my family. I explained my research and see like, hey, I sort of like try not to blow the lab up. It's not what I came here, but you know. So I got interested in science communication throughout my second year, but it was in a way to improve my English in sort of way. So I started making articles, so like, you know, seminars from the university. I said like, oh, I know probably nobody read my blog back then, but so like, oh, X person came to university, you know, did research about so and so and so. And, you know, this is what is interesting. They're coming to Michigan, come and see them or whatever. And it was just essentially a way to get my English better, but then that evolved into being more of a passion of mine. I really like, you know, talking to scientists and say like, oh, this is what you're doing is cool, and this is how I apply to people's life. And, you know, sort of like turn into a passion. And then I joined there's a group in Michigan called Michigan Science Writers. And they sort of like helped me gain some skills. It's like, okay, these are different types of article you could write, like opinion, like long form, like news type of thing. And so, oh, this is kind of cool. So I wrote a couple articles with them. It was like really insightful. And also, coupled with that, I've done a couple of outreach with the university at the Natural History Museum here at Michigan. And it was like it's like articles, but in person. I was thinking about it. So I did a lot of outreach activities about my research in museums and catering more towards like children and also adults, and how to make that transition, and like to not have adults bored what, you know, children are playing type of thing, which is kind of interesting. And then I took all these different experiences and made, so I applied to the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship. I think some of you might be familiar with it, but essentially people that are interested in science communication, they can, you know, apply to the fellowship and get matched to a host site. It could be a news type of host, or more like a national, like Discover or National Geographic, or more local news. So I took the leap and applied to that. So like, oh, they might not take me, I'm just doing outreach and writing articles for my blog. But it turns out they wanted me. It's like, imposter syndrome, take that. But I end up being hosted at Science Friday. Most of you might know about it, but just like a brief introduction. It's a national radio show, and they have different segments, like 2-hour radio show, and it's also a podcast after it's live. But essentially, as a AAAS fellow, I was able to go to Science Friday and be a producer. I had no idea how the hell radio worked, let alone produce. I'm like, dude, I just only do writing for my blog. Like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? So so it's a 10-week internship. So I spent like the first 5 weeks learning how to produce from home, because this is the first time that the whole internship was remote. So trying to learn how to cut audio at home, how to interview people, over Zoom, and, essentially making these articles is calling to people and saying like, hey, tell me what your research is cool. Hi. But at Science Friday, I was able to, interact with different, not only professors, but also grad students. I craft a story surrounding their research, and sort of like try to communicate that to a national audience. And also writing. So the particular interesting thing that I found about with producing is that you have to write in the voice of the host. So it was kind of interesting to experience what Science Friday, because I've never met the host before, not a lot in person. I was like, but it turned fine. And I produced, say, like 8 segments, and it like varied on topics like how are smells organized in the brain, and how you can change mosquitoes from female to males as to control mosquito population, which I thought all of them were pretty cool. And talking to the researchers and seeing how the experiments were carried in the lab was pretty cool. And now, the fellowship was this summer. So right now I'm just getting ready to defend my thesis. It's like I'm a 5th year now. And I have been writing my thesis. I'm doing job search right now as the pandemic goes and everything is remote. So it's quite interesting. So I have to hand in my thesis next week, and I'll defend December 4th. So that's interesting and exciting. And yeah, I'm currently looking, so the next step for me will be looking for jobs within the science communication realm. So I'm looking to be like science writer or producer or a science communication manager. So that's like the horizon for me. But yeah, that's took like 7 minutes, but like, almost time, but yeah.
Also, great. There's lots to digest in there, and we'll get to it.
Yes.
But first, we'll let Niba go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Let me know if at any point the screen share gets weird. Thank you guys so much for having me. I am a scientist, a content creator, a science communicator. I always start out, like Fanuel said, this is real casual with, hey, my dudes. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a queer first-generation woman of color. I was born to a low-income single parent. I'm based now on unceded land of the Ohlone peoples, also known as San Francisco, California. This isn't really relevant for this one, but please don't screenshot stuff that I'm showing and tweet it out. But anyway, so like Attabey said, our paths are really wild. We've all seen kind of this infographic of like, success is not a line, you have ups and downs, but like, I've always found this to be just so not quite capturing exactly what career paths are like. My plant genetics training is going to come out in a second, but I really think of it more as like a little bit of a garden. This circle is you. This is like your garden bed, and you're interested in a lot of things. For me, I was really interested at a young age in like science and video. I really liked just watching cool things online. And as time went on, I got more and more interested in science. I tried doing an internship at a vet hospital. I tried working at a hospital itself. And with these experiences, I learned what I did and did not like about science. So things kind of like, evolved and grew as I got more experiences. And then while I was in college, I needed to pay for it, which was quite expensive. So I started getting really into modeling, which was kind of like a surprising thing because I started out like waitressing and then getting research. And then when I got into modeling, I fell really hard for just like beauty and fashion, these like aesthetic concepts. And so I was developing these interests in this as well. And since I was creating all this like cool content with like, photography and whatever, I started thinking more about strategically, how should I show this and how should I post this? And, sometimes things will go viral, but occasionally you have to be strategic about what you're posting. And so by being more careful about kind of like where I was posting, the hashtags I was using, the concepts I was creating, I was able to land, like magazine covers, get on newspapers, that kind of thing. And meanwhile, I was also spending all 4 years researching in the Brady Lab of Plant Genetics. I actually thought plants were like not super cool, believe it or not. Before I started, I was like, oh no, I'm gonna like cure cancer or like go be interested in ecology or something. But when I tried it out, it actually just like really stuck. I fell in love with plants. And I really want to emphasize, like, if you have the opportunity to try something out and you won't hate it, I strongly suggest just doing it because, like Attabey said, you never know, especially with like things that are kind of nebulous, like what you'll fall in love with, maybe not having podcasting experience before, but you might be interested in it, try it out, see how you like it. So anyway, then as time went on, I was like, this plant science thing is pretty cool. Maybe I should continue doing this. So then I got to grad school, skipping over kind of how hard that was and whatnot. I'm actually graduating in like 2 days. My defense is in like less than 48 hours. So that'll be fun. But yeah, so while I was in grad school, I learned about science communication for the first time. I'd never been exposed to this concept before in my life, but I was like, oh my God, this is totally it. I revamped my social media, started it over from scratch, did a bunch of stuff with science instead, and got more and more into this content creation. But at the same time, I had this like, interest in video. I was like, I really want to create content that's really engaging. It's not just, people can like scroll by it. I want to like make them pause and think. And so I started the process of learning how to create, shoot, edit videos all on my own. And this was incredibly painful. Oh my gosh. This is an example of what one of my first videos looked like. Each of those boxes represents one specific video clip. And this took me like 6 weeks to make. It was so painful. It was so bad. And then as time went on, this is now more like what a video would look like after 20 hours of editing work. It's really difficult to like, put yourself on a path that's like something totally new. But oftentimes, if you're really genuinely interested in it, you'll find that a lot of opportunities end up that way. Now I'm being, making videos for a number of places. I'll get into that later. And this has really just cultivating this skill, despite how painful it was in the beginning, has single-handedly been one of the best things I did for myself. Anyways, so I'm finishing up at Duke, which is where I did my graduate school. I did a SciComm internship at Stanford. These internships, if you're at all interested in doing SciComm or even curious about it, highly recommend. All are paid. There's many, many different types of them. I also did like a science video fellowship and basically just started getting more and more opportunities because I had been kind of creating my own opportunities from the beginning. So people would like see my website and be like, oh, that's really cool. Can you help me design my website? So things like that. I think oftentimes with SciComm, it's hard to really visualize or be able to quantify like what the returns are, so to speak. But, because it's kind of nebulous, you don't really exactly know exactly where it'll go all the time. But anyway, so now this is kind of what my garden looks like. I'm doing science communication full time. It's amazing. I love it. I have really been able to kind of grow all these like different plants and like bring them together in this bouquet of science communication. And I really want to emphasize that like the reason I use this metaphor is because it's not as though we like start from one place and then go to another. It's more that like you are this collection of shared experiences, passions, skills, and you bring that with you regardless of whatever job you are in, whether you choose to go into academia and be a professor, or you become a science communicator, or you go into policy, or if you totally decide, you know what, I'm just going to go like be a dancer or like go be a writer altogether. Like you're still bringing those experiences with you and they're still valid and valuable. So now I've been able to work with a number of organizations. Here are some of them listed, and being able to kind of like develop all these different parts of my garden, so to speak, has really been what led me to them. Some of these opportunities have been things that I actually pitched them an idea, asked them if they'd be interested in hiring me for something. Sometimes I'd never hear back, but other times they'd be like, yeah, we'll hire you for this. And by the way, we also have this other project we'd like to hire you for. So I highly encourage you guys to kind of plan for change, because your garden will constantly be changing and growing in like wild ways. Yeah, so that is me, and I guess we can open it up to some questions.
Wonderful. Yay, this is cool. Okay, yeah, quick clap. Let me do a little reaction here. Yay. to the both of you. I think this is great contrast and overlapping places there. So I'm gonna try and be the moderator. Of course, I'll ask a few questions here and there, but to the fellows, please feel free to jump in and ask questions. I'm gonna shut up for a couple of seconds here to see if there's any urgent questions. Go ahead.
Can you elaborate on some of your experience with these SciComm internships? I didn't know those existed.
Yeah, no, dude, I didn't know they existed either. I will say, like, a lot of them are also like not super well publicized. I highly recommend going to my website, www.notesbyniba.com, and then there's a tab called Resources for Science Communicators. There's a whole list I've collected of fellowships because they're just not publicized. There will be ones that are kind of with individual universities like Stanford, or with institutions like Fermilab. Attabey, you can comment probably more on the mass media.
Sorry, I was just like putting the link here. But yeah, I was part of the mass media fellow, and that's a paid internship that takes up 10 weeks. And you get, so the first week is more like an introduction to science communication. They teach you how to get the news from press releases, where journalists get their news, and you get hosted at the side, other news or national radio, or whichever. They have like over 25 host sites that you can get matched to, and you can look at their where fellows from this summer go posted. And if you're interested, I can, you can connect with me later. I can tell you more about if you're interested in those news type places. I can connect you with the other fellows. But yeah, is there any specific interest you're interested in? So there's ones are more focused on science writing, more like science communication overall. But yeah, I think it depends on what you're also looking for.
I will say there's certainly a lot of internships. Most of them are cyclical. So a lot of them happen only in the summer. So like AAAS, for example, happens in the summer, and the deadline is January 1st, which means you need to start, if you're interested in that one, you need to start planning for it now. It's a very thorough, there's a lot of rec letters, etc. A lot of other ones are cyclical in a calendar year. So they'll have 3 main cycles where there's winter, summer, and then like a fall type one. So those are ones by like the scientist, NASA. Oftentimes these ones are a bit shorter in their application, but because they are cyclical, you can like apply for them year round. I will say that like every internship you do for SciComm, try to do one that's paid. Many of them are paid. The standard rates are $15 if you're an undergrad and $18 if you're a graduate student. If you are bringing a skill that they do not have or they are in need of, for example, video editing, access to a particular community, translation, try and see if they're willing to negotiate upwards, because I know that like, it's not really easy to like give up 10 weeks of your life for free. So when I was looking at internships, I exclusively looked at paid ones. And then if they wanted me to do video editing, I'd be like, this is a skill that took a lot of time. Would you be able to bump it up to like $1 more per hour or something like that? And like worst case, they'll say no. This happens like after you've been admitted. So they're not gonna like, be freaked out by that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. There, all these resources, they're out there, right? They're just all over the place. And so hopefully you saw in, I think, week 3 or 4, when I gave the fundraising lecture, there is like 30 or so grants, because internship is one domain. Then there are all these grants that you can apply for as well. There can be mini grants all the way up to like tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. But all these resources are out there. So, and any other questions? Anybody? This is really for you guys. The other thing here, and I want to just get right to it, is and both of you really articulated this, the challenges that you are both, you know, that this road has in place, right? There is a challenge of that most graduate programs really don't provide this type of training, right? You kind of have to go out there yourselves and figure it out. How was that? What are some lessons that you could provide? And we have we have fellows here that are across the board from starting off grad school to almost finishing as well. What's your advice here, and what have been the key lessons along the journey so far? I'll start with Niba.
I guess I'll do one point and then I'll pass it off to Attabey to do one of hers. My number one piece of advice is always ask for opportunities, because there are so many places that don't advertise it, or so many places that will create the opportunity for you if you ask. That happens over and over again, not just with SciComm, but just with life in general. For example, one of my internships at Stanford, I asked because I saw that they had an internship for graduate students. They did not have one for science communicators, but I emailed them and I was like, I have no experience with this particular field of science, but I see you have a grad internship. Would it be possible for me to intern at the communications department, who's like not even listed on this website? So 3 phone calls later, 4 interviews later, they were like, yeah, totally, we're down for this. And so they like created that opportunity. I think this happens quite a bit with like with research. You can like find a cool idea and be like, oh, well, how do I work on this? Who do I work with? It happens oftentimes with SciComm, things that are more like networking heavy or kind of not as clearly defined. You'll find that like just asking gets you so far. And even if the answer is no, it still means that the other person will know that, hey, you're looking for this particular thing. There's been times where I'll ask someone, hey, do you have XYZ? They'll say no. 2 months later, they'll come back to me and be like, hey, remember that thing you asked me about? I found it. Here you go. And like, that's just kind of how it goes. So no matter what, try and ask. The worst thing that's going to happen is they'll say no. Maybe this is a bit of a cheat, but I keep kind of like template emails when I'm like asking people. So I have like a template email if someone knows someone that I want to be connected to, and I'll copy paste that email and be like, hey, I want to get connected with that person. Would you be able to introduce me? I have another one for like being hired for things. Like this is like my general copy paste, and I'll like, specify the jobs. Have that like template email, because it just saves you hours of typing like to whom it may concern, or like sincerely blah blah blah. Like, can you think of like the amount of hours we have spent writing like sincerely your name? Like, what a waste.
Same question to you, Atta.
Yes, so I think one piece of advice that one of my mentors gave me when I was started in the search of science communication is sort of like finding my why. Like, why do I want to, pursue science communication like long term? Like, what is the impact that I wanted to have? What is the community that I want to foster? And I think, it's hard to do because, it's a tough question. Like, what's your why in your life? Like, why you want to do? But I think like after you sort of like narrow down the answer to that question, you will have, sort of like more clear insight of what you would like to do and what opportunities you need to search. For example, okay, my why, okay, like I know I don't want to do academia. I know I don't want to do industry. I want to do science communication. And this is something that I communicated to my PI at that moment and people in my network. So like, okay, can you forward me opportunities in science communication? And, it's something that I also came forward when I went into conferences when it was a thing in person. But, when I was like, in the round table, it was like, oh yeah, I'm interested in science communication in this and this area. Do you know any opportunities? So like, having that in mind whenever you go to all the people you talk to, I think will help you identify the sort of like opportunities that you need to sort of like advance in that direction. And as soon as you explore all these outlets, let's say, okay, science communication is pretty broad. There's outreach, there's writing, there's all these things. Like, okay, I feel like I can fulfill my why on the realm of like science writing because I can reach this type of community that I want to target, and I want to reach out to. And then in my case, that's the case in my case. And I talk to different people in my network, like, okay, do you know any opportunities I can do science writing that is paid? And they say, like, oh yes, I actually know somebody, and know somebody that knows somebody, down that line. So like along the lines of what Niba said. But I think, finding your why and why you would like to be in science communication, it could lead you to identify further opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great. Finding that why, and it's hard. It's not.
Yeah, it is hard. Yes.
You're gonna find that overnight, and at times you be in conflict with yourself, right? But you start off thinking one way the next day, because I myself have been there. So I went through the entire, I would say, pipeline, right, to the postdoc stage, and then you're like, what am I doing? Am I staying here, or is this something else? And it's that nagging feeling you're getting, right? And I think it's perfectly fine if you want to stick around in the academic realm, become a professor. You can still do science communication, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Really finding, and you make a good point, Atta, that science communication is so broad. You can do so much in there, right? And that makes it both joy, but also a challenge, right? Yeah. So, and I want to keep digging further here on these challenges, because I think science is full of like failure, right? We know this. I wondering if you have any specific examples you can share and with fellows about, there was this specific thing, I really struggle with this, when I was trying to do X, and then this is what I ended up like doing to overcome this thing. Do you have any examples such as that?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. So in science communication, or science writing, you sort of like pitch your idea to like an outlet and see if they like it. And I will say, like, as I was starting, like over 90% of the time, my ideas get turned down. And so like, oh my God, this is because like, I'm not a good science communicator, and like, I'm not this and this and this and this. But in reality it was that, okay, I'm maybe not pitching. So when I was in Science Friday, I had to pitch every week. And I realized like, oh wait, I was not pitching the right way. I was like beating around the bush, and it was mainly a topic, not a story type of thing. And, learning the different tools could do wonders to like, for you, in order for you to be successful. But it does take that type of trial and error that, I said it was hard to, push back that imposter syndrome that say, hey, it's not me. I just need to learn this X, Y, and Z in order for me to be successful. And it's okay for me to fail in order to get there, type of thing. And it's hard because, getting yourself turned down so many times, just like, you have to like just be resilient at that point.
Niba?
Yeah. Oh gosh. So many failures. Woke up to a failure this morning. I didn't even remember applying for it. I think before I talk about failure real quick, one of the things that's really helped me with the failure is the fact that you have to like really redefine what you think success is. And I think a lot of us see it as like, we apply for a grant and then we get rejected, and that's the failure. But you need to push that success marker like a little bit forward. The fact is, you applied for a grant, you wrote so many essays, you thought about the concept so long, and you know that you're going to copy paste that section into other things. Like we've all reused sections of our applications. We're not sitting around writing something brand new for everything we write, right? Like that's a waste of time. And that in and of itself is so much success. When I applied for SAI, I had just been rejected for I think 3 separate things. And I was just like feeling really down, and I applied and, changed all of my application to make it more specific, explain the project, etc., got accepted. And I realized that, had I not had all of these times thinking about the idea, framing it better, reiterating it, etc., that was just like so helpful in all of this. So really redefining it as like success is doing the thing. And then whether or not you get accepted or you get awarded or whatever it is you're applying for, that is like an aftermath. It's an after story. So like bring that success marker closer. Your success is how many times have you pitched? How many awards have you applied to? Like that is the marker. It's continually going to be scary to like pitch. And like the thing with, careers and life in general is that like that marker of success is just going to continually get farther and farther if you let it. You can be like, oh, like this year we're scared of pitching. Next year we're scared of like not making it into like Discover magazine. Like if you let it, it's just going to get bigger and bigger. So just keep that like success marker as like you did the thing. That is already very impressive. I've been rejected for so many fellowships. I've been rejected for so many jobs. I've been rejected for so many things. I've been rejected to things that I don't even remember applying for. Let's put it that way. Like straight up this morning, I woke up and I got like a rejection email from something I applied to in June. I have no recollection of applying for this. And I was like, okay, cool. But like that's really been the biggest reframing. And you know, it's like super cheesy to do things like, you know, like write down things you're grateful for and like sit down and meditate, but like those things are like what keep you more balanced. Like, you know, being mentally balanced is not this like state you achieve and then you're there. It's this like constant effort to like stay balanced on the like, you know, balancing pole or whatever. So like doing all those little things to build up your emotional resilience will help you, you know, like say you apply for a really big fellowship, you don't get it. The most important thing is being resilient enough to balance yourself again from that negativity and then be able to like apply to the next thing, because you can sit down and cry for a while and that helps a little bit, but it doesn't help forever.
Yeah, and I think that even for myself, in terms of you wake up in the morning, there's one rejection for lunch, another one for dinner, and then you're like, what's next? There's a quote somewhere I remember saying, you know, somewhere here, there's a yes, right? There's a yes in here somewhere, and I'm looking for it. I know there'll be a bunch of no's, but there's a yes in here somewhere. And so I think both of you have sort of navigated that, and you're finding, sometimes it hurts. I'll just be honest, right? It hurts, right? You spend hours and hours, and you're feeling really good about it, right?
You submit your personal statement. Here's my life story. My life story isn't good enough for you. Like it's hard to not take it personally.
Absolutely, right. And
yeah, but you only need one yes, right? Like especially if you're like job hunting or something, it doesn't matter if you get 100 no's or one no. You only need one yes. No one cares about the no's.
Right. You just need one yes, and then it makes it easier to get the next yes, and it just keeps going and going. Just even this past week, I think I told you guys I was doing this pitch competition, right? To Niba's point, the success wasn't that, oh, I needed to win this thing. No. The meaning was, hey, made it to the finalist. Mm-hmm. Yay, right? That was great. If I win, oh, icing on the cake, wonderful. But you know, then you learn, and then from that you grow. And we didn't win. I didn't win. I'll be honest. And I was totally fine because I learned so much, right? That's always the goal in this. You know, what are you seeking to learn? Questions from the audience here. Gabriela.
Thank you both for sharing your stories. I have a question. I've been dealing myself with how did you balance, because you were both at school. I mean, you're almost out of it, but how did you balance at some point what you wanted, what was your passion for science communication and your research? Because I think that is like really hard for me sometimes to do, because I feel inclined to just do science communication sometimes. And then my PI is just like pushing me down. It's like, remember, you have to graduate at some point. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, I if you're gonna go first, Niba. Okay. I will say I did poorly. There's like no right answer. But I do remember like my PI pulling me back like on a one-on-one meeting and said like, you know, you need to be careful with your time and yada yada yada. And I was like, but I like to do this, like, you know, how to reconcile. But essentially what I ended up doing is like, okay, I did sort of like, you know, similar to what you all were saying, like, you know, saying like yourself milestones. On like, for example, if I wanna, in order for me to graduate, I need this paper. Okay, like what are the little milestones? So like, okay, how can I complement a little bit with the psych on the side? But essentially, you know, I was really grateful that I took the time to do those science communication activities, because essentially that's what I put in my resume and has the only thing that had been able to get me into interviews. So it's worth doing. It's just like trying to make time for them and not, you know, because it could easily get overwhelming. Like, you know, one day a week you're in lab and then the rest you're in psychom or type of thing. Like that's not gonna happen, but you know, having that in mind. And then, you know, essentially what I end up doing like towards the end, what I reach like some sort of balance is saying like, okay, since I'm gonna be mostly in science writing, let's dedicate my whole time to like this organization in science writing, and let me just do that. And, you know, for like home, my craft and things like that. And that's how I end up reaching the balance, just like focusing in the science communication real, the thing that I was interested on. And that sort of like helped, because at the beginning I was like, okay, let's do writing, let's do outreach, let's do, I don't know, what have you. So science communication, sign me up. But sort of like narrowing down to what I was sort of interested, sort of like helped to reach that balance. But I want to say that it is really hard sometimes.
Yeah, I think you'll find that it ebbs and flows. You know, there's some weeks where you're in lab and you're running like, you know, a 12-hour experiment, and there's other weeks where you're just like chilling and waiting for results. One thing that I did at like it's a common idea in like tech Silicon Valley entrepreneurial stuff, but there's this concept of 138, and that's the number of hours that you have in a given week. And so look at your hours. You spend a certain amount sleeping, you spend a certain amount socializing, you spend a certain amount eating, you spend a certain amount in your lab, and a certain amount outside of that. Think about, these are the number of hours I have in my life, and this is how much I can dedicate to my research to accomplish what I need to get my PI to like not have that conversation and not be like, you're behind, you know? Because if you can show like, hey, I've put in like 30 solid hours this week, that's a lot. First of all, like who actually does 30 hours a week? You know, half the time we're like waiting around for PCR to run, and like then having like this amount of hours is your SciComm. And I think Attabey hits a good point of like honing in on what you want to do for SciComm. You know, there's so many things to do. It's impossible to hit all of them. Think about, you know, say you have a really rough, like, you know, semester coming up because of RNA-seq results or whatever. Do you really want to spend all your time doing this huge SciComm outreach, or can you spend that time doing a project that's a little more manageable? And like similarly, if you have times where you have larger amounts of hours available, you can do different projects. So think about like, you know, what are the minimum requirements in order to fit both of these needs, and how can you adjust the projects that you're doing within these hours to fit into that really well. In addition to like the 138 hours thing, one thing that was really helpful, and a mentor of mine told me to do this from the very beginning, is just tracking all of your hours. So that means there's an app I really recommend called Clockify. It's free. It'll track how long you spend doing each item. So I created like a whole bunch of lists, like from I spent this much time on email, this much time applying to new opportunities, this much in professional development, this much in SciComm. And I would track, you know, this is how many hours I'm spending. And I realized like, oh my God, I'm spending so much time on my email. And so since then I've been like narrowing it down to like, I will look at my email for 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon, and that is it. And similarly, just kind of like creating those limits for yourself, because it's totally valid to do SciComm. You can include it in your dissertation. You can include it as part of your scientific reach. But you want to be able to back it up by being like, you know, I did put in these hours at lab. It's not my fault the experiments failed. That's fine. But just being like, you know, I did do this. That's it.
It's a good question, Gabriela. Any other questions? The other one, you know, in thinking about balance, it comes in ebbs and flows, as Niba said, right? But one tip I found is also just blocking a chunk of time, like, you know, I'm doing this time, okay? And you know, for example, Gabriela, you need to finish like grad school, or if that's a goal of yours, right? I want to finish grad school. And to do that, I need to make sure that these things are done, right? And then when you have this time, you allocate like, okay, but then this is my time to do SciComm here and science outreach, whatever have you. That could help a little bit. And that way it's structured, right? Like Niba said, she does 1 hour in the morning of email, and it's like a block in the calendar. Like in my calendar, I have like grant writing blocks, like exclusively grant writing. I don't do anything else but that. And then I'm writing, searching, you know, putting it away. So that helps a little bit. Then you don't have blocks, your entire calendar is blocked. That's the other extreme. So find a balance in the middle somewhere around that. And when I get to a little bit, and I certainly don't want to leave this till the end, how do you take care of yourself, like when you're doing all of this? Because it's hard. I've been up 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, websites crashing, people responding to deadlines are due, grant is due tomorrow. How do you take care of this, and what's your advice for fellows as they go through this? Because it's a tough road out there, ebbs and flows. Atta, how do you go first?
Yeah, so I will say, number one, having your support network is key. So I have another friend that she's on like very, friend and mentor, that she's in communication. I go to her like, hey, I got another job rejection today. Like, what's the deal? Like, is this not good enough? Like, well, life crisis. But yeah, it's just having somebody else where you can like rely on and say like, hey, please tell me I'm not a failure, type of thing. But just having that, support network that can, sort of like back you up. And then for me, I, have a motto that is food before science. When I was in lab, it's sort of like glorified within science that, oh, I didn't have lunch today because I wanted to run this PCR or transform this bacteria. I'm like, no, you need food. And I carry that, even though it's like work from home type of thing. It's like, life before anything else. So it's like, okay, I have like a hard deadline of like, okay, after 5 or 6, I turn off the computer and do something else. Like, I don't know, I need to go outside type of thing. And just sort of like having that hard cut for myself, it just made me be more efficient throughout the day and also take care of myself at the end of the day. But that's what has been helpful for me, and also doesn't leave me hungry at the end of the day.
One of the reasons that I fell in love with science is because of the applicability of the scientific method. You can use it to track, your workouts. You can use it in research. You can use it to train your cat. You can use it on yourself. So like, I really took that to the max, and I basically created, I don't know if I have to turn off my screen to show you guys this, but I created this giant list. Oh, good. These are all of the things that I attempt to do in a single day. And so you can tell, like, even though I'm covering it, I clearly did not do one of them on one of the days, but I'll have all this giant list of like, it includes things like meditate, hydrate, take my vitamins, write down things I'm grateful for. These are all like really small, like tiny things. But I've found that over on this column, I do like a total. So I'll see like how much have I totally managed to accomplish. And then I'll track down, this is my mood and this is my productivity. And I built this list with very, very many iterations. Like every month it changes. Sometimes I'll remove something. Sometimes I'll add something. Right now, litter box is on there because one of my cats needs that changed all the time now instead of every other day. So it's just a matter of like tracking different parts of your life, whether that be your work. I have like sections that are like deep work, 3 hours minimum, which means I sit down for 1 hour. I use this like little hourglass timer thingy that I have, and I do not touch anything other than like what I'm trying to work on. So in that method, I just kind of like reiterate like over and over again, these are the things that work. This is how my mood and productivity have shifted as a result of these. And so you can use that scientific method to be like, these are the things that work for you. Because for me, I really enjoy meditating. It takes a long time and it takes like long gains. Like you won't see gains after like a week, but that's something that works for me. Whatever works for you may be different. It might be working out. It might be, hanging out with your partner, etc. It's going to be different per person, but I encourage you to look at like what exactly those things are and measure how you feel and how your productivity is afterwards. Because there's plenty of things that'll make you feel good, but won't impact your productivity. And there's plenty of things that'll improve your productivity that won't make you feel good. I definitely am guilty of like skipping meals pretty often. And so I started adding like, did I have at least 2 meals today? And I realized like oftentimes I wasn't. And so I started putting that in. I noticed that my mood was getting better. There's a number of like different like tracking apps and like tracking things you can do with like Gantt charts, forests, bullet journals, etc. I really encourage you guys to like try them all out and see what sticks. And at different points in your life, different ones will stick. Like I used to really hate bullet journaling. I didn't think it was for me. And then suddenly I like started graduating and I was like, oh, this is the method. Work from home makes this perfect. So just like make sure it flexibly adapts to wherever you're at in your life.
Yeah, I think it's really important to keep that balance. And because throughout the last 10 weeks, we've been talking so much technical stuff about project development, right? Yeah, I think you guys are sick of me saying logic model at this point.
I was sick of you saying that after like day 1.
Promise, that's why I've been refraining to even get there yet, okay? But I'm so happy to see Sarah ask this question. So guys, here it is. How have you measured the success of a science communication project that you've worked on? And I think the general question there is like, what is the measure of success in what you're doing, to keep it broadly? And Atta, how did you go first?
Yeah, so for me, I will say like, I will give the example when I was in Science Friday. I will say a measure of success, for example, at that point, one of my tasks was pitching ideas. And more often than not, your pitch doesn't come through. And, my goal at that point, or a way to measure my success is like, okay, past fellows or past interns, they have pitched and they have gotten through 3 stories. And that's like, I don't know, 20% of the things that they pitch to make stuff realistic for myself. And that's a way I measure my success then. I also, put myself some goals when I was within, the fellowship. I like set myself like, okay, while I'm here, it would be great for me to network with people that are already here and see how was their trajectory. It's like, okay, if I talk to at least 3 people, then, I can expand my network and potentially tap into that into the future. So that was one of my goals. So if I meet that or surpass that, then, I meet one of those goals. And one of my other goals was like, I think having science communication in Spanish is really important for me. How can I do that within the organization? And that was another goal that I set up to myself. So I think like the goals and how you measure the success after them, it's key depending on what you say yourself. So for example, you could set, okay, a way that I measure my success during the internship is after I did X segments. And I did them, and if you haven't yet, then sort of like revise how you make yourself, or reassess if that's the right goal you should have, type of thing. Because, you could say, for example, if you're in social media and you say like, oh, I want to reach, I don't know, 5,000 followers at the end of the year. And it's like, oh, I didn't make it, I'm a failure. Maybe you should like revise, that metric of success, because maybe it's not realistic at the end of the day. So it would just kind of depend on what's realistic, what is not, and what is success like.
Yeah, I agree with everything Ada said for sure. I'm gonna share a slide that I did for a talk I did last week, because I think this is really relevant, is that communication goes in this cycle. You have like your objective, and that is what will form your strategy. That is what will form your content. That is what forms your feedback. So it's all about like what you're trying to do to begin with, if your metric of success is reaching the public, so to speak, think about like who exactly you're reaching, who is viewing these things. Oftentimes I see things where scientists will be like, oh, I'm trying to communicate to the general public, and then they'll copy like, the article and they'll put it on Twitter with like 1 or 2 lines explaining the article. And I'm like, dude, regular people, the regular public is not on like #science Twitter, like you're reaching other scientists. That's like super duper common. And there's also like the, I guess, like metric of how you're reaching people. If you're doing outreach, are the people who are coming mostly other scientists? Are they like kids? Are you reaching those people? Not that if you want to reach other scientists, that's perfectly good, especially if your goal is like networking and building that, then that's the whole point. But if you're trying to reach, I don't know, a very specific community, look at not just like how many people showed up, but ask how many people of this community showed up. I think that's super key. And I think in like just any type of feedback in general, it's always good to have metrics. You can get metrics, from, if you're doing social media stuff, this one was a social media talk, you can get them like from the app, but you can also get it from like directly polling your audience. If your goal is to increase awareness about a specific thing, poll them, ask if they, understood this, yes or no, afterwards. Try and keep these surveys like as short as you can, because we've all like done these surveys and we hate them being long. Having some kind of incentive, like you're going to be entered for a draw for like a $20 Amazon gift card or something like that is always really helpful. And also like doing them immediately after your event, or even like during your event. Sometimes I've seen like people who are hosting like a Zoom webinar be like, hey, we have this survey, here's the link. We would really appreciate if you guys could take the time to fill this out while they're doing the question section. So like, they haven't had a chance to listen to the answers, but that does encourage a lot more like people's engagement, because the people are like, okay, we've already allocated this time in our schedule to do this. This is just part of doing, being a part of this event or whatever. And then one thing I'll mention is also that like, there's always going to be people who don't like what you do. This was a talk about like social media, but like I think it applies everywhere, especially with like PIs who may not be supportive and stuff. You'll definitely get people who don't see the value in SciComm. You'll definitely get people who don't see the value in wasting your time, so to speak, with anything that is not related to your job. I really believe that if you're doing things in such a way that you're not pissing anyone off, then you're really not doing anything worth doing. Some of the best engagement and opportunities I got were after I had received a lot of like, not like a lot, but like quite a bit of people being like, why are you wasting your time talking about beauty science? And then like a week later, a beauty brand approached me with like a monetary deal and free product and like a huge thing. And I was like, this is exactly the audience I was trying to reach. I'll also add that like, if you're part of a marginalized group, if you're female, if you're like a person of color, etc., you'll get especially targeted. There's a lot of people who will be like, you know, show me your credentials, or do you even know what you're talking about, etc. This happens even more for us. So try and take all feedback with like a grain of salt. Like, you know, is it really even valid feedback? Are they just like attacking you? Or is it like, you know, they're just being rude? So some feedback is helpful. Not all feedback is helpful. It really just depends on the project, and I'm happy to talk about like if you have like a specific project in mind, how you would measure the impact of that.
And I'm hoping that, again, I'll say it, logic model would provide a framework for you to think about these things. I think this is, if anything, you extract from our program is, that is the fundamental basis where you can build everything. And it's a dynamic document, right? It's not supposed to be static. You made it once and that's it. You will adapt, you will get new data, you will adapt, you will change and look, oh, okay, this makes sense like this way here. I found it to be super useful, and I'm always like going back to it. I think I'll look at it every day, almost. PowerPoint, whatever have you. So questions, more questions for our panelists.
If no one has a question, I'll throw in like a quick tip. I know you guys are all at SAI because you're interested in science policy, entrepreneurship, talking, science communication in some way, shape, or form. Academia does not care about this, but the rest of the world does. LinkedIn is so important. Oh my gosh. I highly encourage you guys to go on LinkedIn, connect with everyone here, connect with Fanuel, connect with us, and spruce up your profile. Like, have a cover image that really represents what you're talking about, whether that's like science, or if you want to be like a keynote speaker, a photo of you at an event. You can take mine as an example. I have like a graph of climate change, and then in my about section, I explain it. And like five separate people have like messaged me being like, oh, that's a really cool cover image. It totally like validates your stuff, blah, blah, blah. Make sure you have featured things. If you've written a post for someone, if you've given a presentation that was recorded, put those in your featured section. LinkedIn is so undervalued in academia, and like so many opportunities for me and like science communicators and policymakers especially have come through there. So anyways, spruce up your LinkedIn. Can't tell you that enough.
That's a great tip.
I agree with that tip.
Yeah.
I think Gabrielle, you had a question?
Yeah, so on that note, do you both, do any of you have any tips on how do you do a better branding? I think sometimes instead of branding myself, I just tend to sabotage it. So any idea?
You can tackle that at first, Niba.
Yeah, sure. I offered these consulting sessions to a lot of people, so I'll give you like the really quick TLDR. When you are branding yourself, sorry, let me like pull up this slide thing again, because this is exactly what I was talking about in this other talk. Some of the key things to think about is, what kind of adjectives do you want people to think of when they think of you and your content and the work that you are like putting out there, whether that's like in person or that's just like, you know, stuff that you're making. I'm just gonna go ahead and go to this. So these are like the general things. What exactly is it that you are going to be different about? Are you talking about your perhaps a marginalized person, a person who hasn't been included in STEM? Is that one of your main things? If so, is it helpful to have visual imagery, photos of you, etc., that kind of like explain all of this? I also encourage you guys to think about what exactly branding consists of. So this talk was for online, but there's a lot that goes into it in person. But online, you have seconds to capture whoever it is you're trying to talk to, right? So these are the things that will go into that. You have like your about section, you have your cover image, you have your photo itself. Based on those, basically you can have a cover image of yourself, a professional shot. But if you're trying to reach people who are interested in like fun, quirky, etc. science, you might want a photo of you like doing an experiment or like wearing some cool goggles or whatever. But really start with like what you want your like image, so to speak, to look like, and then look at the things that kind of define your image, so to speak, and then make sure they all apply. I'll try and find the slide for this. There was another talk I went to that really showed like, the different ways to do so. I think it's hard, but at the end of the day, you want to have a brand identity, even if that's just like, this is me and I'm a scientist and that's it. That's still like stronger than just like, I'm a person on Twitter, or just like, I am a person on the internet. And your brand identity will change and shift. And ideally it would like get narrower and more specific and more about you. And that's kind of what you want to go for.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And like, trying to figure out, try to at first, have that blog that nobody read. I was like, okay, how about if I like talk more about my experiences and just like making science fun and applicable, and science is everywhere. How do you engage with it, type of thing? And I like try to make myself that as a brand. It's like, okay, then you can go to nature and find these mushrooms, and they have some cool facts about it, and you can do it too, type of thing. So that's like how I like transition myself into the brand type of thing. But
yeah, if you guys are starting out, some basic tips are basically try and not have your name or your handle attached to any one specific thing unless you're like 1,000% certain that's what you want to do. So one example of this is, we can use two examples. One person is Susanna Harris. She's the founder of PhD Balance and one of the close friends of mine. When she created all of her accounts, she created all of them under the handle Susanna L. Harris, so that it was just her name. And so if she like changes to do something else in the future, people will still be following her. On the other hand, we have people who are established and want to be known for a specific thing. Emily Calandrilli is known as the Space Gal on all of her accounts. It's consistent. It's maintained the same. That's another thing. Make sure they're the same across different accounts. You don't want like a different name on your Instagram and then a different name on your Twitter and then a different name on your LinkedIn. That's not going to make it easy for people to find you. So for her, since she's interested in space and talking about space, she includes that in her name. Some of the typical ones I've seen online are just like people will do first and last name. If you have a name that's not quite common, for example, like mine, I knew that if I did like Niba Nirmal, a lot of people would not know in one word where that started or ended. So if I did something like notes by, that would imply some kind of like notes, science-y, maybe like learning something. And that would be like catchy enough. It's an alliteration for people to be able to follow. Think a lot about like, if you can get into like brand colors, don't just pick like whatever colors are your favorite. Think about those adjectives first, like, do you want people to know you as like the fun, whimsical, like kid experiment person? Or do they want you to know you as like the person who like runs around in the wilderness and like picks up cool mushrooms and like tells you what those mushrooms are? These are two very different types and it will have very different colors. Kids generally have like, bright colors. Things in the woods will have like earthy tones, maybe like a bright, red for a mushroom, etc. I'm happy to talk more about that if you send me a message through my website.
Yeah, and I hope you appreciated like the different components, right, that are involved in this, right? From the infrastructure, like building the thing, the understanding that you need to find a problem solution fit, right? We talked a lot about that at the beginning, to then thinking about the funding infrastructure, how do you actually build this thing, the partnerships you need to do with partnership development, to fundings, acquisition, right? And supporting that. And people, I think we even talk about people management. I think Jean Gabarino slightly talked about it at the beginning, building a community, right? How do you do that for your initiative? There's so many pieces, and this is the reason why the Fellows Program, we've started this and we are slowly sort of growing this body of work, and to showcase and help you all go through. So please definitely do reach out to Niba if you have specific questions and other things that are going on as well. Atta, any final parting words Niba, Atta, just as they venture into the world, the wide world.
The wide world of our rooms in quarantine. Yeah, I guess a quick point of clarification. For branding, sometimes it's helpful to separate you, the person, from your work as something else. Like Susanna, for example, separated PhD balance from Susanna, the person, and that's been really helpful. I'm running into a couple, like, not like huge problems, but some problems now where people are like Niba, the science communicator, versus Niba, who talks about beauty science. So I'm trying to make that more distinct. And like final words, reach out to us if you have any questions. I know everyone says that, and like few people take us up on it, but like every time I've given a talk, the people who like reach out afterwards with like specific questions, like, you know, even if you're not able to answer that question, we know people who can. And the same is true for like any talk that's similar like this to this, like from SAI. I can't underscore enough how much I love SEI and what an amazing resource it has been. The first time I went through the logic model, I was like, this is so painful and such a waste of time. And then like 2 days later, I was like, dang it, that was really useful. I need to look at this every day. SAI has like remained one of the like best things for me and my brand from the start. So you all are in a great position just being here. If you ever need help with like looking at a grant, or like someone to just tell you like, it's okay that you missed that pitch, or it's okay that you like failed something, like go to SAI, because that's how you build that network and you build that community. Because at some point you're going to graduate, and at that point you need to make sure you have some sort of community and a brand that doesn't just like depend on like taking selfies in lab if you're no longer in lab, you know. Think about like the long-term sustainableness of it. What are those communities like? Who are you associating yourself with? And, you know, how can you continue to bolster them?
Yeah, 100% agree. And yeah, and if you're like looking to, gonna look into more into this logic model, everyone talks about it. But yeah, like if you're interested in applying to the AAA Vida Fellows, feel free to reach out. Like I made a small Google Drive folder with my application and tips and things like that I can just share with y'all if you're interested. And same as Niba, if you have like, you know, a pitch or anything that you would like us to review, we are happy to do that. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the. I just want to say thank you to both for sharing those insights. I think there's so much there. I think we can keep talking for the next 3 hours, right? But I really do appreciate you. And please know for the fellows, this is you know, as you now slowly are going to venture out and continue on your journey. Know that you will continue to be part of the SAI family. So we're going to add you to our listserv. You're invited to all our monthly meetings. We have different residents presenting every month. So the next meeting is actually going to be Demo Day. So you guys are actually presenting at that event for us for November. But that's the kind of what Niba said, the community that we're slowly building, and because we're all in this together, we're all in this boat trying to do our piece, right? The pie is massive. It's just so massive, so much need out there, right? To communicate science and integrate science into everything. So reach out. And to Niba's point, people rarely reach out. I tell you, I've used Calendly now to say, here are my slots, my next 3 months here. Pick a slot. They still don't.
But the people who do are really quite incredible. I gave a talk to a bunch of teenagers like a couple weeks ago. One of them reached out to me and was telling me about her goals and whatnot. And I was like, do you want an internship? And she was like, yeah, can I do that? Is that even possible? And now she has a science communication internship, and she's literally 16 years old. Like, there's no way she could have known about this because I didn't include it in my talk. She reached out to me afterwards. This happens so often with like every talk, you know, maybe the person you reach out to doesn't know like a specific thing for your question, but like we all have a network and we can all reach out to that network. And especially with things like SAI, where like it's small and close knit, where like we can be casual and like tell you about like crazy, embarrassing things. Like people are much more willing to help you in these kinds of settings than like, you know, if you attend some massive panel with like 300 people and then you talk to the person afterwards, like that's a bit of a different feel.
Right.
But yeah, thank you so much to Fanuel for having this. Oh my God, you guys, he's just been the best mentor and leader for SAI. I can't understate this enough. Like connect with him on LinkedIn, follow him afterwards. Maybe don't like stalk him, but you know, really keep him as a good contact. He's a great reference for reference letters. He'll be able to talk about that whenever you're applying for stuff, whenever you need stuff. Fenwell's a dude.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good ping there. They didn't know that part, but yes, definitely do reach out for sure. Okay, then